Hey, it's Emma, and I'm finally here to do the tour of my bookshelves, plural. I've put this video off for a very long time, but because the end of the year is drawing nigh, thank goodness, I thought it would be the perfect time to get one more last little snapshot of how my bookshelves and this little space looks at the minute, and also because my shelves are reaching maximum capacity. They almost have no more room for any new books. We're almost out of vacancy in this hotel, so I thought it was the opportune minute to show you all of my books. I also think that the little book nook I've created is pretty much almost complete. I put a few last minute finishing touches on it. I used to have all my bookshelves over there on this one wall in my apartment, which my last bookshelf tour shows, but I recently moved them all into this little cozy corner. I think without further ado, let's just jump right into it. It's probably going to be a fairly long video, so feel free to grab a snack or a drink, and let's just start with an overview. So this is what it looks like from very, very far away, and I just realized that this picture is very crooked. This little area of my apartment used to have the couch and the TV, but I wasn't really using the TV like at all, so I decided to turn it into a little book nook. Just to start off over here, I have a little side table where I keep loads of candles and this lamp that I found thrifted. I really love the little details on it. So this is everything that is on the table at the minute. I have a whole collection of candles. There's pumpkin pie, and then these are a few little mini Christmas candles. And then the one I currently have going is cinnamon Irish cream from Bath and Body Works. I'm also currently drinking some peppermint tea in this mug that one of my best friends got me. It like changes color when it gets warm. All right, so moving on from the couch, I have this red carpet that I really like. It's really soft. It's very soft. And then this is the reading chair of my dreams. Oh my gosh. Just to start with everything that's on it, I currently have my hooded blanket here from Imposia. It is a blanket that comes with a cloak and a hood. This design is, I think, called Austen's Garden because it's inspired by Pride and Prejudice and a few other of Austen's novels. And there is still a link and discount code in the description if you are interested. So that is that. And then also on the reading chair, I've been keeping what I'm physically currently reading. The books that I have here right now are The Dark Interval by Rilke. This is going amazing. I'm also reading Bluets by Maggie Nelson. Finally, I am reading The Turn of the Screw. I've been listening a lot to the audiobook of it. Keep those there because this is where I do most of my reading. Where I like to sit is in this big chair. I've been moving it around a little bit, but I currently just have it in this corner. And then if we come around, all my bookshelves are here. I have 3 at the minute, but I may soon be on the lookout and in the market for more. So this is just a very small overview. I also very recently decided to put up a few frames in this corner. I think I'm gonna put up a few more once I get them in, but for right now I have 3 going on. So this one is just a diagram of different spices. There's like cloves, nutmeg, cardamom, cinnamon, juniper. I just thought it was really, really kind of cozy and very fall and autumny, and I really, really loved it. I actually just took this little diagram out of a recipe book that I have, so that's where that came from. And then this one is a little kind of quote board I decided to make, so you can like really easily take this off and insert a new quote that you want to put in. So for the time being, I have a quote from Rilke, which was kind of in the preface of The Dark Interval, which is the book on my reading chair, but I just really, really loved this little piece from the Book of Hours. I thought it was so nice. So that's the quote that's currently in there, but I love the idea that I can just like change it out whenever I find a new quote that I love. And then this one is also a piece of art from a book that I took out, and I really liked it. I really like the colors more than anything else, so I just put that there. All right, so just for a little kind of explanation and overview of all the shelves before I take you through them. Right here at the first bookshelf, the 2 black bookshelves I have are from Yisk, which I think is mostly like a furniture store, and then the brown one in the middle I got secondhand. To start at the beginning of the first shelf, I have classics, and the order kind of spans over the bookshelves, so you follow it like this way instead of down. So all my classics are in chronological order, and then we have 1 shelf of classics, 2 shelves of classics, 3 shelves of classics, and then we get kind of into modern classics and then adult kind of literary fiction that starts to be arranged alphabetically once we get to here. And then kind of at the beginning of this shelf right here, I have loosely historical fiction, but I kind of segmented it off into ancient historical fiction because I weirdly have lots and lots of like ancient Greek, Roman, and Egyptian stories. And we have later historical fiction and stories that are set kind of in the past in our adult fiction. This entire shelf is fantasy. And then down here we start sci-fi, and then we go into dark academia, and then just dark murder mysteries, thrillers. This entire shelf is young adult, and then there's a little bit of young adult down there, and then it goes into middle grade nonfiction. And then the two bottom black shelves that I have here are classical studies, and they go from Egypt to Greece to Rome, hopefully mostly chronologically in those ancient periods. So let's get into the actual books. Alright, so starting at the very beginning, I also have just like twinkly lights all over my bookshelf. All of my classics are arranged chronologically. This is the first shelf of them just because I kind of like to see like the patterns and trends and what develops over time. It kind of helps too with how things relate to one another, where certain trends arise and how people kind of play off of one another in the literary world, I guess. So let's go through them all. Also, most of my classics are pretty much all thrifted, so none of them really match. I also wanted to show you my favorite per each shelf. So the very first book, I guess kind of the oldest I have on here, is still Beowulf, and then we go into Arthurian legends with the quest of the Holy Grail. This is a really, really nice edition of Dante's Inferno. There's some illustrations and it's a bilingual edition too, so I really love that. This thick one is The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. Haven't yet read all of it, but someday. And then we move into my little Shakespeare collection. So I have Julius Caesar in the really, really nice Pan Macmillan edition. I love them so much. And then this is my little collection of the Shakespeare Folgers library. So I have Twelfth Night, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Out of these, I've so far read Twelfth Night, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and King Lear right here. And then we have King Henry VIII, and the rest of them I have not yet read. So really looking forward into completing reading all of my Shakespeare's. We have Paradise Lost, which I loved so much, and then just moving along into this time period, we have a lot of Gothic stories because I love the Gothic so much, like so much. We have The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. We have The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, which I really loved. We have The Monk by Matthew Lewis, more Anne Radcliffe. This is where kind of the chronological thing comes in because the Italian was published, I guess, after The Monk. And then we go right into Jane Austen. I only have, wait, how much is this? So I have read all of the Austens. I have my favorite being definitely Pride and Prejudice, but right next to it we have a book of Shelley's poetry, and of course Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And then I think what I can safely say is my favorite work on this whole shelf, which is Prometheus Unbound by Percy Bysshe Shelley. This is quite a short play, but it was just so breathtakingly beautiful, so that is my favorite from this shelf, I think, at least so far. I think as well the book I most want to read from the shelf is probably The Monk by Matthew Lewis, just because I've heard so many crazy things about it. So that is my little first shelf done. And then if we swing over here, we will very suddenly encounter my Phantom of the Opera shelf. I have this whole little cubby space dedicated to it because it's my favorite story. It's not the best book I've ever read, but it's my favorite. What can I say? So way at the back though, we also have a little kind of retelling and the life of the Phantom. So it's just Phantom, which is by Susan Kay, and then right here we have my very old beaten up edition of the same book, which I just love so much. So that's in there. And then we start with this edition of Phantom, which is the Vintage Heroes and Villain edition. It has a little quote on the front and also on the back, which I just love. I love it so much. The shelf is getting really crowded, so I think I might change it up soon. And then on top, I have, again, an edition of the Macmillan Collector's Library of Phantom, which is so beautiful. Next up, we have the Bantam Classics edition of it. Probably my favorite copy, and the one that I've annotated very much, a lot. Very annotated and full of thoughts. So, and then finally, I have this one, which I've not yet read out of just because I don't know if this is the best translation, but this is the Perennial Library edition. And then very funnily, I have this one, which is a copy in Korean because I accidentally ordered it in Korean. Don't ask me how, it just sort of happened. And then we swing right along into the second shelf of classics, which I'll just give a little overview of. So we'll start with the little portraits on the end. We have Charles Dickens on the cover of Great Expectations. I absolutely adore this artwork so much. This is by the beautiful and talented Carolyn, who is one of my best friends. I will leave her Etsy shop down below because she makes so many of these authors on the page prints, and they are so wonderful. You can use them as bookmarks or anything, but I got Charles Dickens, and then of course I also got Leo Tolstoy on the cover of Anna Karenina. The two of us actually have some very exciting plans coming in the future. That is all I can say at the minute. I just think they're so stunning. It works out perfectly because they sit respectively next to Anna and next to their books. So right into 1830s, I think, the 1830s, and then 1840s, 1850s, and right along all the way to 1878 with Anna. It's fun as well because it kind of lets you have a little bit of a memory tool if you're trying to teach yourself, like when things are published. It really helps to do it in correlation with other books because it's like, I don't know, association for me. So all right, so let's just start by maybe showcasing what is my favorite book on this shelf. All right, so my top 3 favorite books on this shelf, definitely Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I absolutely adore this book. I'm so due for a reread. I also love The Flowers of Evil, which is a book of poetry by Baudelaire. This was so wonderful. It's also been a long time since I read it though. And then of course, Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. Spine is very cracked and very loved, and I really do love the story in this book so much. So those are my favorites. Starting over here, we begin with The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, which I think, yeah, it's basically like his oldest and first novel. So that is where we begin. And then right next to that, we have The Old Curiosity Shop, which I think is his 4th novel, maybe. We have some Bronte sister magic with The Professor, Jane Eyre. I have another edition of Wuthering Heights because this is just absolutely stunning. This is the Penguin English Library edition. And then I also have her complete poems. So moving into some Edgar Allan Poe, and then moving a little bit along, we have stuff like The Scarlet Letter, which I had to read for uni for my American lit class. And then Dickens again with David Copperfield. We have Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, which I loved as well, highly recommend. We have collected poems of Emily Dickinson. We have A Tale of Two Cities, again in this edition. Great Expectations, which still remains the only Dickens book I've read. And then we move into a lot of Russian literature. This is what I mean. We have a lot going on in Russia right now, but we get a lot of good literature out of it because we have Crime and Punishment, Fathers and Sons, we have The Idiot. This is probably the book I'm most excited to read on the shelf, which is War and Peace. So long. Oh my gosh. It is gonna happen. It's gonna happen soon. I'm gonna read this, and I cannot wait. I read Far from the Madding Crowd by Hardy, which is the only Hardy book I've read so far. These over here, I'm very excited to read. We have The Alienist and Other Stories from 19th century Brazil. And then we have Touch Me Not, which is the great novel of the Philippines. So these two were recently sent to me, so thank you so much to those who did. I'm so excited to read them. Moving back to the first bookshelf, we have more classics continuing along. lots of color, just lots of color. All right, so let's start over here. This is a dainty little teacup which holds all of my bookmarks. There's Han Solo. The selections that made the top 3 favorites of my works on this shelf, at least that I've read so far, because there's a lot on here that I haven't yet read. Of course, we have the picture of Dorian Gray. Everyone loves this book with all their soul. The Broken Wings is a book I got to read this year and I absolutely adored it. This is a tragic love story set in Lebanon and it is so beautiful, such poetic writing. I adored it so much. And then We Have Always Lived in the Castle is just such a strange tale of 2 sisters and ghosts and strange things that I loved so much. So those are my top 3. All right, so I'm hoping these are in chronological order. Some of them may have got slightly just mismatched because I've been taking a lot of books out and reorganizing lately, but the first one we have is The Selected Letters of Oscar Wilde. Moving on from there, we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I love this trend of these years because there's so many spooky stories going on. So then we have a few other of Oscar Wilde's shorter books, as well as The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, which is my favorite Wells novel. More Wilde, I really love Oscar Wilde so much. I have 2 editions of Dracula because this one was kind of falling apart a little bit, so I got a nicer edition. I have A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Have yet to read it. I have Kafka's Diaries, but I want to start with something a little more concrete from him, like maybe one of his bigger works than just reading his diaries. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I have Metamorphosis and Other Stories here. This is The Broken Wings. I love Edna St. Vincent Millay and her early poems. I would highly recommend, especially if you just want to get into any poetry at all. I think she is so beautiful, so accessible, and I love her language so much. It's like a lullaby. So I have The Road Not Taken and a whole bunch of Robert Frost's poems that I read. Yeats, and then we have F. Scott Fitzgerald, where we have this whole period as well. So The Beautiful and Damned, and then I have Virginia Woolf, Jacob's Room. I am so incredibly excited to read The Prophet by Gibran because it's been at the top of my radar for a really long time, so this guy is here as well. More Virginia with Mrs. Dalloway, and then we move into like The Great Gatsby, Hemingway. I've actually not read Hemingway at all in my life yet, so glad that these are here for me to do so. This is probably the book I want to read maybe the most on this shelf, aside from The Prophet and some other ones in here, but I've been meaning to read Steppenwolf for so long. I've heard it's amazing and so many people recommend it to me. So we have a couple Lovecraft collections of stories. We have Brave New World, The Last of Fitzgerald here, and then a few newer additions to my bookshelf is The Invention of Moral by Casares, Thirst for Love by Yukio Mishima, and Bestiary by Cortazar. So very excited that those recently made their home here. We have some T.S. Eliot, Pound, Crucible, Lolita, On the Road, Snow Country. We have Beckett, Dylan Thomas. I have 2 editions of The Bell Jar because I found this really stunning copy in a little, those library boxes in the community. I just thought this was so beautiful, so I have that here as well. I haven't read The Bell Jar in years, so I'm very excited to get back on it. And then right here I just have a little candle holder. This is probably one of my favorite parts of my bookshelf. It's just all of Rilke's work. He is my favorite writer, my favorite poet, just everything. So I have his works just organized literally by the size of the book. So I have different editions of some of his works as well, but the first one here is kind of the only novel he wrote, which is The Notebooks. And then Stories of God is a collection of short stories. Highly recommend. And the book I recommend the most by him just to get in and probably start is Letters to a Young Poet, which I have 2 editions of. One of my favorite books of all time, along with The Book of Hours, which is a book of poetry. It is just breathtaking and heavenly. I love it. And then just going along, I have more selected poetry, his new poems, a big book of his poetry, and the Book of Images. So that is my collection so far. I'm sure it will grow more as well. Someone asked me what my favorite shelf was on my bookshelf, and honestly, it is this one. I just love so many of the books on here, and I know so many of these are like 5-star predictions for me, so this is my favorite shelf. So I have some little pumpkins. Now I'm gonna remove the little pumpkins. All right, so my favorite books on this shelf are 100 Years of Solitude. This is like the best book I've ever read. It is amazing, literally every single way. It is like the perfect book. It is perfect. I also love Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. These are 2 books I've been able to read this year, and I just adore them. They're so good. And then probably to make the top 3, I would say Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. I adore this book with my whole heart. It is absolutely such a gorgeous novel, so much going on, so these 3 together are definitely my favorite books on this shelf, although I have many more. All right, so just to go through it, we have The Master and Margarita. I'm not even gonna try and tell you what my most anticipated read on the shelf is, because they're literally all of them. Like, all of these I am dying to read. The Master and Margarita is no different of a story, so a lot of these are unread, and I am just like, ooh, I just want to read them so badly. Anyway, we have The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, the Wide Sargasso Sea. This is another one I want to read so badly, is John Gardner's Grendel. I've heard so much about it, and I just really want to get into it. This one as well. Honestly, I think this is my next read that I'm gonna pick up, because I really want to see what this is about and get into it. This is Clarice Lispector's Agua Viva, and yeah, so I think this one is going to be my next read. We have 2 Angela Carter books. This is really high up, The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories, along with The House of the Spirits, because I've heard it's so similar to 100 Years of Solitude by Marquez, which was my favorite book of the year so far. So very highly anticipating that. It looks like I've read Handmaid's Tale, but I have not. I found this thrifted, and yeah, I still haven't read it. I know, I've not read any of Atwood's novels. So Perfume is really high up there. A few of these 2 books, Nervous Conditions and here we are, A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid, were both books on one of my courses that I took for uni. Both of those are amazing. I read Beloved this year too for the first time. 5 stars, adored it. Sexing the Cherry by Jeanette Winterson is a really great strange tale, along with Arcadia is a play. I loved it. The Memory Police and The God of Small Things, I recently got these as well. They were gifts. Thank you guys so much. I've heard this one is breathtaking and heartbreaking. Borges I got because I really want to get into his short stories. You guys know I adore magical realism, and this shelf just screams magical realism to me, and it's so fascinating and so cool. I know these are pretty much all considered modern classics, but I cut it off at, I guess, Autobiography of Red, but mostly Borges, because Autobiography is 1998, so that's just kind of where I cut it off. But then we move into Anne Carson's collection, of which I have 3 books here. Autobiography of Red is definitely my favorite, hands down. We have The Remains of the Day, which I'm dying to read, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which I'm dying to read, and then Dream House, which I'm dying to read. So all of these are just such beautiful books as well. Another of my favorite authors is David Mitchell. I adore his work. Cloud Atlas still remains my favorite novel of his, but Ghost Written is extraordinarily beautiful and wonderful as well, so I'd recommend that. And then I have this big edition of The Bone Clocks. Moving into Murakami and this weird Victorian bottle liquid candle that I still have yet to light. I've had it for years. We move into my little collection of Murakami, which is also spanning the next shelf, but After Dark is where I recommend kind of maybe starting with him, because I think it's a really good place and it is such a good book. Oh my gosh, so good. We have 1Q84, his masterpiece, an extraordinarily large book as well. And then we have Kafka on the Shore, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, which is incredible, and Colorless Zuro Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. So, those are the Murakami books that reside here, and I honestly just can't tell you guys how much I love the books that are on this shelf. Alright, so this shelf is kind of where the literary fiction ends and stuff like that, just this little bit here, and then from The October Horse all the way until Cassandra by Krista Wolf, this is like the ancient historical fiction that I was talking about, and then from Can You Hear the Nightbird Call, which is just so saddeningly beautiful, until, I guess, maybe The Book Thief. I have loosely historical fiction in alphabetical order, and this is in alphabetical order as well. More pumpkins, because I refuse to relinquish my hold on the spooky season. Alright, so we have one lonely Murakami book, Norwegian Wood, which I've read. I read it years and years and years ago, probably like 6 years ago, so I'm due for a reread. These books here I'm also dying to read. We have A Tale for the Time Being, Convenience Store Woman, The Iliac Crest, which sounds exactly like everything I want inside a book. And then we have The Shadow of the Wind, and the book that breaks everyone's hearts, A Little Life. The first one, The October Horse by Colleen McCullough, is about, I think, Caesar's life and stuff that went down in Caesar's time, so that's interesting. The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker is a really good read if you want a retelling of the Iliad. The Song of Achilles, of course, is here, which I loved, by Madeline Miller. We have The Egyptologist, which I'm really interested in reading. I'm not sure what I'm going to think of this book. And then honestly, you guys, we get into some sillier books, because we have murder mysteries set in ancient Rome, along with weird stories about Roman soldiers, and we have Wilbur Smith's Pharaoh, along with this strange copy, which is called The Nightlife of the Gods by Thorne Smith. I literally found this in a cardboard box. Very strange. Anyway, moving on to this, I highly recommend Can You Hear the Nightbird Call. I think I'm going to be reading The Painted Girls very soon, which is about two sisters who modeled for Degas, the painter. Ophelia's Muse is about the Pre-Raphaelites, and specifically about the affair between the model for this painting, Lizzie Siddall, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti. We have two books from Outlander. I'm not really sure why they're here, but they are. Then we have stuff like The Paris Wife, Tulip Fever, and then the two books hiding back here are The Book Thief and The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbary. This middle shelf has The Skull. I found this thrifted. So many people always ask. It is thrifted. And then way back here we have The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux, who wrote Phantom of the Opera. It's this really big, stunning, beautiful copy. These butterflies I found thrifted as well. Right here I have a little succulent. His name is Magnus. He is 2.5 years old, or we've known each other for 2.5 years, so he sits right here. Alright, so right at the beginning I had to squeeze in two kind of contemporary reads, those being The Elliot Girls and Beach Read, which is a contemporary romance. And then fantasy begins alphabetically with The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, which I haven't yet read, but I'm really looking forward to. As well as Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, my favorite book on this whole shelf, The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. I adored this trilogy. I read all three of them last year, and they really got me through some hard times, honestly, and they were such nice companions. I don't have the last one, but I absolutely adored this fantasy book. I thought it was brilliant, and just so much appreciation for this series. So we have some OG, The Eye of the World. We have Nevernight, which I haven't yet read. A Court of Mist and Fury, which I haven't yet read. I'm saving this for a video I plan to film. I've only read one Sarah J. Maas, and I'm interested to create something with these books. So, Daughter of the Forest, and then we have Game of Thrones. I read all of these except for Dance with Dragons. I just honestly, out of principle, kind of refuse to read it until I for sure know that we're gonna get a finale, a completion, an end, a finish line with this series, just because I don't trust. I loved The Night Circus when I read it years ago. Don't know how I'd feel about it now, but this was a favorite as well. These two books, very underwhelmed by them, honestly. I liked them, I thought they were good, but I was expecting so much more. Blood of Elves, haven't yet read. We have V.E. Schwab here. Priory of the Orange Tree, I loved. I think I have a lot of critiques on it, but I honestly really enjoyed it overall. And then very lonely, The Fellowship of the Ring. Alright, so here's a little overview of the next shelf on the first black shelf. So really brief overview of this shelf. From Philip K. Dick to The Prestige, we have Sci-fi. From Ninth House to The Secret History, this is the little mini collection of dark academia. And then from here, I guess all the way to The Dark Descent, this is just like, it's mostly adult fiction, but a lot of it centers around dark themes, scary things that go on, ghost stories, gothic, modern gothic tales, more loosely dark academia, and just really dark, spooky things is mostly what my adult fiction, at least right here, is comprised of. So that's kind of just how I order it. But right here I have a little cactus candle. He's so cute. So I've actually read all of the sci-fi I own, which is super exciting, and honestly, like, these titles, I love them so much. They are astonishing books. This one I enjoyed so much, as well as Neuromancer. William Gibson, I think, still remains my favorite sci-fi author. I absolutely adore his work. Solaris is the most recent sci-fi 5-star I read. This is one of my favorite books of the year, and it was so incredible. I do really enjoy The Prestige as well. Ninth House was a disappointment. We're not going to talk about it. And then we have If We Were Villains and, of course, Donna Tartt. Moving on into here, what is my favorite book on this shelf? I think the best book is House of Leaves. I don't talk about this as often enough as I would probably like to, but this book is a nightmare. I read this for uni, and it scared me, I think, more than any other book I've read. It gave me so much anxiety. Even just doing this right now is like reminding me of all the things that horrified me about this book. I've never been properly scared or scarred by a book, but House of Leaves did it. It horrified me more than I can ever explain, and it's still so hard to think about this book. So it is my favorite though, because it was so incredibly well done. We have 2 books in the Oscar Wilde murder mystery series where he is a detective. I honestly love these so much. We have a couple Agatha Christie, we have another Daniel Lusky, which I haven't yet got around to. We have The Monsters of Templeton, which I've never heard anyone else talk about, but I've yet to read it. Mexican Gothic was a book I really adored this year. I loved it so much. Right here I have a candle that supposedly smells like rain on this little teacup holder. And then in the corner we have White is for Witching, The Dante Club, and this, which was one of my favorite books of 2019, The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. I highly recommend. I think this was so well done. I loved it. Right here I have another candle, pumpkin pecan waffles. This smells so good. It smells so good. And then I have some of my textbooks for classical studies, namely just my Latin and ancient Greek textbooks for school. So now we move into some young adult stuff. This is probably isn't my least favorite shelf. A lot of these books are so underwhelming to me now, and I'm not really loving young adult so much anymore, but the ones that I have kept are ones mostly that are quite nostalgic for me, and then I have some new ones that I'm gonna give a shot to. So to start it all off, we have Belle, the little Funko Pop, which I found surprisingly at a thrift store. The first book I have here is Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo, which is the 3rd book in the Grishaverse. And then I recently picked up Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I'm gonna give it a shot. These 2 books right here are some of my favorites. I read these when I was very young, and I absolutely adored them. The first book is Firebringer by David Clement Davies. I loved it. This is a book about talking deer. Well, like, they don't talk to humans, but you know, they talk to each other. So I absolutely love this so much. I haven't read it for years. I would love to read it again and see what I think now. And then I have also The Sight, which I really did like as well. We have, of course, The Hunger Games, Wither by Lauren DeStefano, which I did really enjoy this trilogy when I was young. This is probably my favorite book on the shelf. It's Entwined by Heather Dixon. This is a retelling of The 12 Dancing Princesses, and I just loved it. I think I gave it 5 stars, honestly, which is so incredibly rare, but I really still think this book lives up to everything. I think it's wonderful. I got another book from her that I haven't yet read. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful cover. We have Tinder by Sally Gardner, which I love. I think this is really well done as well. We have The Name of the Star, which I adored when I was younger. I think this was one of like the first young adult series I got really into. Gemina, honestly, I would give this 5 stars. This is by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the second book in the Illuminae Files trilogy. I loved it. This is my favorite of the trilogy. I've started and finished this series this year and I adored it. I love it so much. Another Sarah J Maas. I've never read Throne of Glass. I know. I'm gonna get on it. And then I have Queen of Shadows just because I found this hardcover copy at a thrift store for $2, so I couldn't say no. Up here, if you've been on this channel for a long time, you guys know I read Jekyll and Hyde in, I think, like February. This was in an unhaul video and then the pandemic happened, so I never took it anywhere, but it is now back because it's going to feature in an end of year video. So that is just, it's so funny every time I mention it. It is awful. Finish up, we have the Shatter Me series by Tahara Mafi, which I'm not yet done because there's like so many books in it, but I'm up to, I think, Defy Me is the one I have to read next, and then we have Ripper and Virals, which I love. I love this series so much. I never see anyone talking about it, but I love it. Here I have this owl who's actually a candle if you behead him, which is so sad, but he is, I think, pumpkin pineapple. Interesting. Alright, so little overview. Young adult ends with the Wren Hunt because Mary Watson's name starts with a W. And then from Persepolis to, well, I guess these two are graphic novels, and then I have some manga. And then we start middle grade with Tuck Everlasting, and this is all of my middle grade. As well as Harry Potter, which is tucked back there. My favorite book on the shelf is Quite Hard because middle grade is just so magical. We all know there's so much in middle grade that we love and we hold so dear. But my top 3, Dark Hills Divide by Patrick Carman, one of my favorites ever. Of course, Matilda and the Graveyard Book and Coraline, I adore. And probably Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. Just so wholesome. I love these worlds and this writing, and just highly recommend. I really do mean to read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson soon. I've never read Brandon Sanderson, but I would like to. I absolutely adore this series by Megan Shepherd. Is it Megan Shepherd? Yeah. They are young adult retellings of Gothic tales like Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and just spooky Victorian stuff. So we have some Maggie Stiefvater. I adored Shiver when I was younger. I really did. We have Persepolis. We have Sheets. And then we have Sailor Moon, which is truly one of my favorite stories as well. I just love this series. I have only read volume 1, so I'm up to volume 2. We have The Wind in the Willows, Anne of Green Gables, The Amber Spyglass, Lemony Snicket's other series, which I really loved this first book, Who Could That Be at This Hour? It was just full of all his staple quirkiness, so I would recommend. And then we have The Mysterious Benedict Society and The Amulet of Samarkand. The 2 decorations I have on the shelf, we have a replica, very wonderfully done, honestly, of King Tut's throne, which I found at the thrift store. I don't even know how this came to be or how it came to be where it was, but yeah. And then we have some more art. So that is this little shelf. This is what the next one looks like. Mostly non-fiction. We have one Yellow Lantern. And then I had to put some very heavy books at the beginning. The Arrival by Sean Tan is a really beautiful wholly illustrated book. I have an illustrated copy of The Wind in the Willows, which is so sweet. And then I do have 2 of the illustrated Harry Potter, which are so heavy, so they just get squeezed into here. I also had to throw the Velveteen Rabbit in here because I didn't really have much more room for it, but that's there too. Love the story. So we start off with science with some Stephen Hawking. This is The Universe in a Nutshell. And then I have A Brief History of Time, which I read a long time ago. We have a book of constellations. We have weird science problems in here. We have Darwin's Origin of Species, and then we have a book about synesthesia. Moving a bit closer, I have some books on religion. The story is the Bible in novel format, kind of, and then I have this one, and then I've been meaning to get more copies of some other things. Namely, I would just like to explore so much more. But I also have 2 books about mythology. I have Chinese Myths and Legends, and then I have this very beat up, literally broken in half book, which is The Oldest Stories in the World by Theodore Gaster. I've been meaning so much to get more mythology books because of course most of them are on the next shelves down below. Then we move into a brief little stint in philosophy. We began with Tao Te Ching. I have stuff from Nietzsche. I have this book that's called Just the Freud Reader, which is like his kind of introductory and central works. I have Being in Time. This was a textbook for a course that I took in the philosophy of ethics, which was really interesting. And then I have just a book on theory and criticism, I guess, which is Anatomy of Criticism by Northrop Frye. We have The Warrior Queens. This was really interesting. The Butchering Arts, Joseph Lister's quest to transform the grisly world of Victorian medicine, all about antiseptic and how it was introduced and what the Victorians were doing to their medical patients, which is not a fun time. Young Romantics is about the Shelleys, Byron, and other tangled lives. We have a book on the Medici. We have a book about the Chicago World's Fair and the serial killer actually who used the fairground as his, I guess, place where he found people. And then I have an encyclopedia about secret signs and symbols, which is really interesting. I had to stick Sylvia Plath here. And then the last 3 books, I have The Immortal Evening, which is about a dinner that took place with Keats and a bunch of other people, artists during that period. We have a book about the Incas, and then we have a book about Edgar Allan Poe's life. So that is that one. All right, and finally getting down to the last 2 shelves. We start off with classical studies, a lot back here. I hope you can see this okay. I tried to start it chronologically, but a lot of it, you know, it's just kind of textbook stuff, so it's not all ordered. But I have a book about how to read and write hieroglyphics. I've been meaning to get into this for a long time whenever I have free time. I don't know if anyone else had these books at their elementary school, but they were the kind of books that everyone like fought over and wanted so badly. There were these books filled with pictures and explanations about history and science and stuff like that. This was a textbook for a course I took about the art of ancient Egypt, which is super interesting. And then I have I think this is the Oxford, yeah, History of Ancient Egypt. This is cool. I have a few of these. So this one is kind of geared towards kids, but the artwork is absolutely just so stunning. It's about the Odyssey, but they retell it with beautiful art, and I love this book so much. I think it's so beautiful. So Hiding in There is another version I recently got by the same people. This one's about Demeter and Persephone. They have a whole bunch of them. This is a textbook I had for Greek art and archaeology. This is the first book actually that I bought about Greek myths before I even knew I wanted to study them at university and study the Greeks, but I really like this copy, honestly. I think it's beautiful and it's well written, and I would recommend. It's beautiful. Quickly, I have more textbooks and then just some random books. This one's about the Law of Athens. This is a beautiful book about the Mycenaeans and their culture and what they were doing and everything like that. This is another book about Greek myth. I have Works and Days and Theogony. I have a couple editions of the Iliad. Much prefer this one. This is the translation by Richmond Lattimore. I have the Odyssey. This is a stunning book. I read it this year, absolutely loved it, and translated by Anne Carson, whom I love and would give the right valve of my heart to. So then I got the complete poems of Sappho. I have Aeschylus, and we get more into playwrights and Greek tragedy because I have the Oresteia, Sophocles, Euripides, and stuff like that. This is also by Anne Carson because she combined 3 different plays into her own version of the Oresteia, which is so nice. And then shoved back here in the corner is Plato. This bottom shelf holds down everything because they are the absolutely massive editions of Norton, mostly textbooks. So we have theory, and then we have just random English textbooks. We have one all about just language in general, then I have science fiction because I took a course in sci-fi, and then this is the 16th and 17th century. This one is major authors, and then this one is American literature. Finally, the last shelf. There it is. I had to stick the complete illustrated Shakespeare right here just because it's so big and heavy. Then I have the Egyptian Book of the Dead because it didn't fit on the other side. I have this really, really beautiful copy of Herodotus. I have a couple history books just to finish off the Greek side. We have Apollonius, and then we have Edith Hamilton's The Greek Way. And she was one of kind of the first women to academically write upon the Greeks. And then I have this vase, which is so beautiful, and I found at a thrift store. And it just sits right there as the separator to the Romans. I have much less stuff about the Romans because I do prefer studying ancient Greece rather than ancient Rome, but I do really love studying Roman stuff as well at school. The Aeneid, I have the Fall of the Roman Republic, I have Tacitus, I have 2 editions of the Metamorphoses, which I've been meaning to read for forever. This is the copy I'm going to read it out of. Finally, I have Plautus for comedies. I have Livy, The Rise of Rome. This one's Cicero, this one's Seneca, this one's Suetonius. I love this book so much. You have no idea how much I laughed reading it. Highly recommend if you want to be entertained while also reading history. It is so, so funny. And then just right here, these are some more kind of textbook editions. So for example, this was a textbook on a course I took in late antiquity. This was a textbook for a course I took about women in Greece and Rome. So was this one, and so was this one, and this one was for a course I took about Roman wall painting, mostly, so very fun. The very last book I have here is Great Treasures of Pompeii and Herculaneum, mostly like art and just little explanations. It's a very nice, beautiful coffee table book, so that is that. All right, I can't believe we went through every single book on my bookshelf. I wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, and also thank you so much for literally making this possible and making me always feel so inspired and motivated to talk about and create videos about books, because it's created all of this and I couldn't be happier. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was maybe informative and possibly also fun, and I will see you very soon in my next video about books, or maybe not about books. If you guys want any videos not about books, let me know, because I would love to branch out and spread my wings. But I think that is all for now. I hope you're keeping well. Ciao.